Hello, I'm Valerie of Valerie Custom Quilting. T-shirt quilts have become very popular in recent years. It's a great way to preserve t-shirts from events that are meaningful in a way that is enjoyable and useful. I'm going to show you today how to prepare t-shirts for use in a t-shirt quilt. This is the shirt I will be using in our demonstration. When you make your quilt, you will need to determine the size of the finished squares you'll need based on the size of the design on your shirt. I know from other shirts in my collection I will be making 13-inch finished squares. You determine the size by using your ruler to measure the size of your design. This one is only 5 by 6. They can be much bigger. So first, what I'll need to do is separate the front of this shirt from the back. You can use scissors, you can cut it off that way, but there's a faster, easier way. Make sure your shirt is nice and flat. Lay down your ruler so it's very, very close to the edge. There's only a smidgen, probably about 1/8 of an inch hanging out. Cut from there to the armpit. Same thing on the other side. Again, about 1/8 of an inch up to there. Now, I just follow along the seam line free form, but as close as I can to preserve as much of this as I can. So there's one sleeve gone. Here's the next sleeve gone. And lastly, I'll need to cut across the top here. I like to leave a little bit of this here just as a guideline. Plus that way I know I'll have plenty of space. So there we go. Here's the front of my shirt. And here's the back of my shirt. We can get rid of that. There we are. This is now ready for the fusible interfacing. Here is the fusible interfacing I will be using. I prefer the Pellin 906F. It's a very nice, lightweight, fusible, non-woven interfacing. You need it to stabilize your t-shirts because, of course, they're made of knit fabric, which stretches. In order to stabilize it for use in your quilt, you will need to use some fusible interfacing to, make it nice and solid and steady so that it doesn't stretch on you while you're sewing it together and while you're quilting it. This is not the only fusible interfacing out there. It's just the one that I prefer to use. It's available at Joann's. Okay, so I mentioned that our t-shirts will finish at 13 inches square. I need to cut my fusible 1 inch larger per side, so 14 by 14, which gives me room to trim off extra and still have my fusible all the way out to the edge of the shirt. So I will cut my fusible 14. There we go, that's a little bit of a tight fit here. Here we go, 14. By 14. And it doesn't have to be exact because, of course, you will be trimming this later on. There we go. I now have my square of fusible interfacing, and it's time to go to the ironing board. Now it's time to fuse the interfacing to your shirt. When ironing a shirt with a silkscreen design on it, you always need to press from the back, otherwise you could melt your design. So take your shirt, place it face down on your ironing board. Now if you notice, let's take a look at this real quick. If you notice on this shirt, the design is up very close to the neckline here. So in an effort to try to center this as much as possible, we will put our fusible interfacing up as close to the neckline as we possibly can. So here we are, the shirt is laid face down. I smoothed it out as much as I can. Here is the little bit of the neckline that I left there when I trimmed off the shirt. Take your fusible with the glue side down. With this particular one, the Pellin, you can feel a rough side and a smooth side. The rough side goes down, and I'm trying to center this you know, side to side as well, just a rough. It doesn't have to be perfect because you will be trimming later. So I now have this up all the way to the edge of the seam line here. And I've got my damp press cloth. We will lay this down on top, like so. And using your iron, you will press until you've covered this whole area. There's actually a little bit hanging down here, so I'll have to scoot it up and finish that. So first, let's fuse this part. You put your hot iron down, you press for a count of 10 seconds according to this fusible. You'll have to follow your manufacturer's directions for your fusible. And then remove your iron, overlapping the sections, move to the next section. And you'll continue to do this until you have pressed and fused everything that your iron can reach at this point. There we go. That should be everything for this part. Now it's a good thing to inspect, and I see a couple spots, one here and one here and one here, where I didn't overlap enough and it hasn't fused. I need to go back and fuse those spots to make sure that they are stuck down appropriately. You can see the shape, the outline of my iron that shows that I've been overlapping. I fixed the spot that was here, and the spot that was here, and the spot that was here. But it's still hanging over the edge here, so now I need to advance my shirt. And you can see here, this part has not fused yet, but then the rest has. So this part now needs to be fused in the same way as the rest of this was. I will take my press cloth, I will go get it damp again if I needed to, and then I will press this here and get this fused. Okay, we're back at the cutting table. The fusible interface has now been fused to my shirt. Here's the front side and here's the back side. And again, knowing that the design on the shirt is right about here, it's actually much closer to the top of the shirt, I'm going to trim here first. I want to trim off a little bit of the fusible just to ensure that I've got a good fuse all the way to the edge of my cut square of t-shirt fabric. So I'm going to trim here first and then trim to size down here. And then after that, I can trim side to side. So first I'm lining up this upper edge with one of the lines on my cutting board. I want to use my big ruler so it goes all the way across so I can get a good line up along the lines of my cutting board. And if you can see this here, there's only maybe 1/8 of an inch of fusible interface sticking out from beyond the ruler. Let me see if I can zoom in for you here. So you see, I've only got about 1/8 of an inch of fusible sticking out, and this will get my design as close to the top of the square, the quilt square, as possible. Okay, so now I will trim here. And since my squares will be 13 inches finished, I need to cut it 13.5 inches to allow for my seam allowance. So here's 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.5. Yes, I do sometimes count it out like that because I'd rather be safe than sorry. And just to double check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.5. There we go, we're set. Now we'll trim here. And again, if you can see this, there's extra fusible on this part here. This means I've got a good fuse all the way to the edge of my cut edge there. Now I will turn it around. And this is a good time also to try and see if you are centered here. So if I'm cutting 13.5, that means at 6 3/4 inches, which is half of 13.5, this should be centered. So if I line this up with the very edge, it makes it a little easier. The math is a little easier. So 6 3/4 is right about here. If I line this up, am I centered? That looks pretty good, don't you think? And I can double check on the edges here. Yes, my fusible extends over this line here. And at 13.5, yes, my fusible extends over the line over here, so I'm good to cut. So I'll cut here. If you're uncomfortable cutting from the front, if you want to ensure that you're actually catching the fusible on the back, you can always flip this over again. But I'm just going to go ahead for it. And if I flip this over and show you, I've got fusible right along there, so I'm good on that side. And 13.5. There we are. And look at that, I've got fusible. That's awesome. And here we have our quilt square, which is ready for sashing or whatever you want to do to assemble your quilt top. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Happy quilting, and I'll see you again soon.